Alright, welcome back to my channel. Gonna go revisit the F-15. Thanks to feedback from several viewers, which I definitely appreciate. I was kind of pointed out that I didn't really cover the radar itself in depth, and people are saying they're having a hard time finding targets. They can attack them just fine, they can evade missiles, which, it's great. But you need to be able to find something before you shoot it, and that's the big advantage of the F-15. So we really want to maximize that piece of equipment you've got in the nose right here. So we're going to go back to our kind of F-15 radar training mission, and we're going to look at our targets here. We have Hawks heading away from us at a speed of 270 knots. That's important. We have this cargo plane flying perpendicular to us at an altitude, at again 270 knots, altitude 15,000 feet. 30,000 feet AWACS, and the flankers heading toward us at 400 knots. Just to make a point, I think I'm going to crank. Yeah, let's just leave that the way it is. That'll do for the first phase of our radar training. I just want to go through the radar modes, what they do, how the radar works, what the display is telling you, stuff like that, to kind of maximize your hopefully kind of increase your situational awareness. And what I'll do too is in the link, in the description, I'll put the link to the excellent article about the F-15 on Mudspike, which may kind of teach you better than I can, so it's worth checking out. As I discussed in the countermeasure tutorial, how a radar works is you've got basically a flashlight in the nose. It's just that the light happens to be outside of the visible spectrum. It has all the same properties, the only difference being the frequency. It's got the same speed, travels at the speed of light, and emits from your flashlight in the nose of the aircraft, goes out somewhere a few miles ahead of you, bounces off the target, hopefully illuminating it in the exact same way a flashlight does. And those those rays are reflected back, hopefully in enough concentration and quality and whatever, and the right frequency and whatnot for your radar to detect it in the same way that your eyeball does. Well, similar. So that's a pretty good analogy, is the flashlight and the eyeball. Imagine both of those fused into one unit, and that's kind of how a radar works. Now, this is a pulse Doppler radar, which is what you find in most modern aircraft, and they use the Doppler effect to send out pulses of emissions that kind of help. They work best when things are either closing or extending away from you. That's the Doppler effect. They're going to be blue shifted or red shifted into the spectrum, which helps you identify the target. Now, that's important as we go to an active pause here, and I mentioned that in the countermeasures and missile evasion tutorial, that if you fly perpendicular to a radar set, especially if you're close to the ground, you're not really closing or extending away from the radar set in any difference relative to the ground you're flying over, so the radar has a hard time distinguishing between you and ground clutter and is likely to miss you. That's one of the disadvantages of pulse Doppler radar. Well, we'll get to that. Basically, first enter the mission, and you can see on the RWR here on the right, we are detecting those light waves coming from these flankers in front of us, as well as the A-50 AWACS. Now I turn on the radar here, and we see nothing. By default, when you first turn the radar on, you can turn it on and off thusly. I think that's bound to your I key by default, but it's good to bind to your HOTAS. This is in range while search mode. That's RWS. And this is the best mode to kind of detect targets in, because it's got the widest search. You'll notice, let's go over some symbology here. Let's pause track IR so you guys don't get seasick. There, okay. So you see that little caret that's bouncing back and forth left and right on the bottom of that radar display. That is the kind of physical orientation of what your radar dish in the nose is doing. So it's going left, scanning right, left, and right.
Springfield 1, tally bandit at balls 074 460 at
Okay.
8,000.
Yeah, way to go, Springfield. Now on the left, you'll see something similar. You see the caret that is pointing next to those little horizontal dashes, that is the physical elevation of the radar. So you'll notice it goes back and forth, and every time it does a sweep, it adjusts its pitch. That is kind of its vertical elevation. On the left above that, you'll see these two circles that show a 25 and a 14, and that is the highest and lowest altitude in front of you that your radar is currently scanning at. And you can adjust this. Let's go over some HOTAS binds. Scan zone up and scan zone down is how you adjust that. This is the default keyboard, but I do recommend putting that onto your HOTAS. You can also adjust scan zone left and right, but what this seems to do is just adjust the range of the scan. I tend not to do that because what I use is TDC slew bound to an axis. This right here, horizontal. You can use your mouse. You can bind that to a four-way hat, whatever, but that's going to be absolutely critical. Oops, sorry about that. These two vertical lines that are moving around right now are your TDC, target designating cue, target designating cursor. I can't remember which. Also called the captain's bars or the bug. And this is what you do to kind of highlight a target, and then when you want to lock it, you press target acquire, and it'll lock it. And I'm going to go over those binds as well. In fact, let's just go over some binds. You want to have, for purposes of sensors, scan zone up and down. That's going to be important. We just covered that. Radar on and off. Target lock, which would be your enter key, but that's crucial to have to your joystick. And target unlock, TWS target. That works. That basically unlocks your target. It's like a unlock. Return to search does the same thing. That unlocks your target. It depends on what radar mode you're in. We'll go into that. And what else? Weapon change. These are just other stuff I have on my HOTAS here. I think that should do it. Oh, yes. Pulse repeat frequency select. That's PRF select. We'll get to that. So you can adjust your range by using keys on your setting keybinds to do that. But what I do instead, what I tend to do is just use my cursor. It's called cursor bumping. Is you move this closer or farther away from you depending on how far out you want to search. So you move it back down to the bottom and keep going, and it'll bump it back down. You can see this number on the upper right. Yeah, I got it. Thanks. That number on the upper right is the maximum range away from you in nautical miles that your radar is scanning at. 40 miles, 20 miles, 10 miles, whatever. On the lower left, you'll see G, that's your ground speed, and on the bottom right, you will see T, which is your true airspeed. So this is your speed over the ground, which is important for navigation purposes. True airspeed is important for aircraft performance. You also see these little, it's kind of obvious what this little horizontal thing is. That's your wings relative to the horizon. You can use that to kind of, if you got your head down in the radar like this, it kind of helps keep your situational awareness up. Okay, so we've got some targets out here. You notice them at, looks like they are closing at us despite this being actively paused. They are at roughly 35 miles away. You'll notice these lines aren't just there for decoration. They divide up the radar scan into different sub-ranges. So let's say if you got your radar set at 40 miles like we do here, this will be 30, 20, and 10 miles respectively. Another thing I want to mention is that this radar image is presented as a B-scope. What a B-scope is nothing more. You can imagine looking at your airplane top down. That radar is scanning out in a cone-shaped pattern. What a B-scope does is it takes that cone, takes the bottom of the cone close to the nose of your aircraft, and kind of wedges it out, spreads it apart so that things appear to extend away from each other as they get closer to your aircraft. And that's just for better resolution of what's what when things get closer to you. So this is range while search mode, and what this does is it tells you without locking onto something, all it really tells you is that there are radar contacts here. You can see these horizontal lines, those are enemy contacts. Now, what happens when you go to lock onto a target and you acquire, let's say you hit that enter key or TMS up or whatever you got it bound to, it hard locks the target. Officially, that's called single target track or STT mode. And I will lock up a target and show you what happens. We're about to get a lot more information about one of these 4 blips. Boom. Okay, so what you've noticed is that the other 3 contacts have disappeared. So we have a lot more information about one target at the cost of knowing anything about anything surrounding us. That's important. Alright, so you can see, had a little break in the video there, but I'm going to go to actual pause instead of active pause. Buy some time here. Okay, so as you can see, the screen changed. On the bottom left, we still have our... up on the left, you'll see where it says STT, Sierra Tango Tango. That means single target track. That's the mode we're in, and usually when people say they have something hard locked, that's the mode they're in. This is the only mode you can use. Actually, I take that back. It's one of 2 modes you can use to attack with the AIM-7 Sparrow. The other one being flood mode. We'll get to that in a minute, but almost all the time you're going to be using STT, single target track. On the left, very, very bottom left, you see G406. That's ground speed. And you can see where it says Su-27, or sometimes you'll see where it says unknown. What that is non-compliant target recognition, which is when you get close enough, you get enough data about the aircraft, it'll actually identify it for you, which is kind of nice. On the left, kind of in the 3/4 up the way, you see where it says 19-9. That means it's 19,900 feet altitude for the target. The 805 on the right next to the caret is the closure rate to the target. The H295, I believe that's going to be the target's heading. And you can see it kind of draws a little airplane-shaped thing. Let's kind of unpause it here. You can see how it moves, down. That's kind of like an airplane graphic with the little Y kind of pointing down toward us, meaning it's heading toward us. And I think that's going to be it. And you can see the beam gets fixed, so all the radar's energy is directed at one target. So we get a lot of information about that one thing at the expense of all the others. Zoom out a little bit, and let's go to active pause, which seems to slow things and not actually stop them. One more thing, we're going to change up the mix a little bit and add HUD modes. So I'm actually going to go to BVR HUD mode, and it's going to scan a bit more, and we're going to detect our target, and we are going to select AMRAAMs, which you can see down there on the bottom left. I'm going to hard lock this thing in single target track, and we get some other symbology here. Wait until it gets close enough. I'll do a full pause. Okay, that this circle is kind of shows a bore sight circle. Like imagine, actually we could. It's kind of hard to do this. A lot of the HUD symbology is duplicated down here on the radar screen. You can see the big dotted circle that goes around the HUD is duplicated down here. The solid dot in the middle, that's kind of an aiming reference. So if you're going to attack that target with a missile, what you want to do is put your bore sight on that dot, and it'll give you a good lead angle to kind of assist your missile. Now you also see this vertical scale with the 20 up top and the 10 and a little caret that says 815. The 815 is still your closure rate to the target. The little caret shows your current range to target, and you can see the kind of thick horizontal hash lines. Those are different things. The one up near the 20, that's going to be your maximum range for a compliant target, one that does not evade or use countermeasures or anything. The one in the middle, just above the 10, would be about 11 miles. That's for if the target, that's RTR, or range, turn, and run, or if the target decided he wanted to haul ass back the other direction, your missile would still have a good probability of hit if you fire within that range. And then down below, kind of close to what looks to be about 1 or 2 miles, that's going to be our min or minimum range for that missile. And you can see all that stuff kind of duplicated to some extent down here in the radar screen. So you can actually perform the entire attack with heads down like this if you wish. Usually I don't like to do that. You also see where it says M1, well, that's not right. That should give you, you know what, let's just fire the missile and watch that change. Where it says M 12 seconds, that's time of flight of the missile if fired right now. Let's go ahead and fire on them and you can watch the symbology change. 10, 9. You can also see kind of on the left where it says my track IR is acting up, but you'll see like T 2, 3, you know, that'll be time till the missile goes pitbull. And we discussed that in BVR, so I'm not going to duplicate it here. Alright, so I'm going to reset the mission and fix my track IR problem. I'll be right back with you. You won't even notice I'm gone. Alrighty then, back in the mission. Had to kind of restart things to get my track IR working correctly. We're going to do a lot of the same kind of stuff here. One more thing I want to say about range while scan and single target track mode. They seem to kind of work in conjunction with each other. Is that if you are using range while scan, which is your general search mode, that's probably what these Sukhoi 27s are doing out here. That, you know, they're going to have a radar warning receiver. Anything newer than like a MiG-21 or a MiG-21 or newer, they're going to have an RWR. So if you're using this radar, chances are pretty good that any 3rd to 4th generation fighter aircraft or anything, even non-combat aircraft, have these RWRs in them. So they're going to know you're there probably. So keep that in mind. And when you go to hard lock them into single target track mode, they know. That's going to set off all kind of warning in their cockpit, the same as it would for you. So that's you can use that to your advantage if you want to scare them off, or kind of put them on edge, or maybe if you're lucky, have them go defensive. Another note about range while scan mode here. You see it's bouncing left and right, left and right, left and right. This radar dish will scan, I believe, 60 degrees to the left, 60 degrees to the right. So, you know, with your head, if you're doing this, you can see that's pretty quick. And that's also a pretty big sweep of the sky. And that becomes advantageous if we want to, like, lock a target. And if we want to, you know, notch it, if you're going to do an actual BVR engagement. You can put it all the way off here, kind of at the limits of the radar gimbal in single target track or track while scan mode. We'll get to that in a second. That's pretty far off. You're not flying quite perpendicular to it, but you have definitely decreased your closure rate for sure. So keep that in mind. And this is stabilized to the horizon, up to the limits of the gimbals, the physical limits of the sweep of that radar. So you can climb, you can dive, you can move your aircraft all around, as long as it stays within that 60 degrees left or right, that 120 degree, you know, horizontal scan zone, and pretty far up above or below pitch axis. You're going to maintain that lock. See how I'm doing all these maneuvers, and well, I almost maintain lock. I'm trying to explain something here, but it's generally pretty good. You know, the radar can usually pivot faster than the aircraft can, so you don't have to worry about losing your lock most of the time by putting them kind of off bore sight. So that's range while scan and single target track mode. That's that. Now, most of the time when you're going to make an attack, you're going to attack using track while scan mode. So switching over to TWS mode, you'll notice a few different changes. I'm going to go active pause, and hopefully it works well enough for us here. Pause track IR, and this is in scan mode. You can see it's the little circles there on the left and right. This does narrow your scan range, so that's one disadvantage of track while scan. But an advantage here is you can see the altitude of all these targets. You can see the 19, the 20, the 15, all that stuff up here. That 30, that is the target's altitude in tens of thousands of feet. So that's at 30,000 foot AWACS, the 15,000 foot cargo planes, and 20,000 foot fighters inbound to us at about 32 miles or so. Now, if we drop the scan zone down below 10,000 feet, we'll eventually lose these targets. See how that works? Now, the reason most people attack
Springfield 1.
using track while scan mode, even though it does have a more limited horizontal azimuth. Remember, in single target track mode, yeah, shut up, Springfield. In single target track mode, you can only see one thing at a time. That's a disadvantage of it, and the other, therefore you can only attack one target at a time when you hard lock it into STT. Now, in track while scan mode, you have the huge advantage of being able to soft lock multiple targets at once. And so you put your cursor over something, soft lock a second target, a third, and a fourth, and so on. I don't know what the limit of this is, but you can see off to the left here, it kind of shows the altitude of the first target you locked. And the cool thing about this is, if you see my other video about how to attack multiple targets at once, when you start firing AMRAAMs at this, it's going to automatically, you can fire one AMRAAM at the first target and it'll automatically cycle to the second one you locked up, and so on. So you can attack multiple targets in one pass. The other huge advantage of track while scan mode is that soft locking them like this does not set off their RWR. They all, as far as they know, you're just in regular scan mode. They do have no clue anything is locked onto them until your AMRAAM goes pit bull. Once it becomes autonomous, it basically goes into single target track mode, but by that time it's usually too late for your target. So let's come out of active pause mode. I'm actually in, and we'll just oops. And if you press your lock button twice on a target, you will actually go into single target track mode. You'll get a hard lock, so be careful about that. Here you're seeing the advantage of the B-scope. As these things get closer to us, even though they're not physically flying closer together, they are farther apart. They actually spread apart on the scope, so you can distinguish them more easily. So you can just fire them 3, 4, and then it cycles back to the first one you locked, so you can truly spam ram the AMRAAMs. So I just launched eight missiles at 4 targets within the span of what, like 5 seconds? 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. Pretty nice. It didn't work that well when I did my BVR tutorial. All right, so that's the general, how the radar works. You can see track while scan mode has a lot of the same symbology as range while scan mode does. It's just kind of a narrower cone. It's more advantageous to attack from. Does not alert your bandits that they have been locked up, as long as you soft lock it. Soft lock, soft lock. You can do that for a bunch of targets. And it's pretty keen. So, as a general rule, you want to scan in range while search mode because it's got a wider cone. Switch to track while scan mode once you have a general idea of where your target's going to be, and then attack using track while scan mode. That's a general pattern. I mean, you can do different things with it. Track while scan does give you less information when you lock something up, but you really don't really need it. You know the general altitude, generally what direction the target is heading in, and how fast it's going, what your closure rate is. That's, for as far as prosecuting an attack, that's usually enough to get you, very well within the ballpark to employ your weapons. Okay, so I reset the mission here because I want to show one last mode, which you probably won't really be using that much, and that is flood mode. What this does, you can see, you press the 6 key on your keyboard. It's also called longitudinal aiming mode, I believe. You can bind this to your HOTAS if you want, which may not be a bad idea because, and you can see this is actually a HUD mode, but it's kind of tied to the radar. So you can see this iron ring, this hard ring, and if you've played other games like Ace Combat, you'll know that that is kind of where we're going here. What this is it just locks your radar in front. That iron ring around the HUD there graphically illustrates the kind of cone that the radar is looking through. It's fixed. It's pointing straight ahead. It will kind of illuminate anything in that ring. It's, as you can see, the range is fixed at 20 miles. It's at medium PRF. It doesn't really do anything. You have to physically put the target in this ring to actually hit anything. And for that reason, it's actually a pretty, if you, this is useful with Sparrow missiles. You can see I've changed my loadout here. I've got Sidewinders and Sparrow missiles. If you are in a position where you need to use your Sparrow missile in a dogfight and you don't have time to come down here in the radar and move the cursor and do all that stuff, you can just really quickly slam it into flood mode, keep your target in that ring, and just fire it. It should hit. It's actually pretty useful in those situations, but it's kind of a limited use thing. Kind of similar to bore sight mode in the HUD. We went over that in other videos. So actually I'm going to put it into BVR mode, find these targets, and kind of demonstrate. I'm in full afterburner, and once we get close enough to see these things, we'll that flood mode is kind of a visual range only thing. It's not horribly useful except for the times when it is. It is not a general use thing, but if you really want to humiliate somebody or just kind of don't have the time to get a good lock, it will work. As you can see, we've changed the range to 40 miles. If we look way out here, I can see a target. I'm going to go ahead and Fox 1 on that and see what it does. It might work, it might not. I'm going to guess probably not, from the looks of things. Yeah, that's a no-go.
Springfield 1, Tally Bandit at Bull 078 for 70 at 10,000.
So I'm going to give a visual reference here. I'm going to go to flood mode, and I'm going to fire. We do have a shoot cue with that light, so I guess you do get some feedback with it. As you can tell, I'm not too comfortable with this. It's not something I'm in the habit of using.
Springfield 1, on station at Bullseye 079 for 70 at 10,000.
Boom, we got a hit. As you can tell, it's not horribly, it's not what I would call a discriminating mode. It's just kind of whatever happens to be in that ring, and you have to keep it there the whole time. If that target leaves the ring, it's not illuminated, your missile has no chance of hitting.
Overgy.
Case in point. Smack. The Sparrow as a dogfight missile. Surprisingly, not as bad as some people say. Okay, so here we're getting to the actual point of this whole, tutorial. I guess maybe I'm being generous by calling it a tutorial here, but the consensus is, and I remember having the same problem when I was a noob, is that you've got your radar, you're sweeping the sky, you're looking all over the place, and you just can't find anything until you just explode. An infrared missile is fired from a fighter you didn't see, and you just die, and it gets really frustrating. You're wondering why I'm using my radar, at least going up and down, searching high and low, wondering why you're not detecting anything. There's a few reasons for that. And people who, especially the more experienced players who like to fly Russian-style aircraft, are actually pretty good at using Russian-style tactics, which, if you're familiar with that, I'm going to keep this guy unarmed here. Keep it an unfair fight just for training purposes. Keep our AMRAAMs here. What, if I understand correctly, Russian doctrine and countries that end up buying a lot of Russian-style aircraft, what they like to do is fly instead of using their own radars like American F-15s and F-16s and F-18s do. They use ground control intercept, AWACS, and stuff like that to kind of guide them either toward an intercept directly or into like an ambush point like this, hiding in ground clutter and using passive guidance. It's kind of like an ambush. Without them lighting up their radar, you'll have no idea if they're there until they smack you. Very dangerous, and that's why overconfidence virtual F-15 pilots can often get surprised by these sneaky MiGs and Sukhois and stuff like that, despite you having better missiles and radar and stuff like that. There's ways to defeat a radar, and we're going to go into that. One is by flying low in the ground clutter. You can see I've got this flight of Sukhois flying at 7,000 feet, kind of behind a... actually may have to lower that. Kind of flying in and out of the ground clutter along this flight path here. So one thing you can remember, I'll go to the mission here in a minute, but if one way to defeat a pulse Doppler radar is to fly perpendicular to the flight path, real close to the ground clutter, the closure rate relative to the ground you're flying over of these flankers here isn't really going to shift red or blue. It's not going to show any closure or extension, and your radar is going to have a harder time picking that out. So that's one way. Aside from them just being behind a physical mountain, your radar obviously is not going to detect it. So you can, anticipate some issues with that. Another thing too is that pulse Doppler radars, one of the easiest things to detect using a radar set is this. Let's look at the physical picture here on the bottom right of this flanker. Look inside these intakes here, and you can see these turbofan blades. Those are kick me signs to a radar set because they've got, if imagine your eyeball looking at the screen right now as a radar dish, and you see these. If it's at a little bit of an angle here, some of the blades are advancing toward you, some are retreating away from you. They're almost at a right angle to you anyway, which is really super easy for a pulse Doppler to detect. So if this airplane is flying at you and decides it wants to fly perpendicularly, see how the fan blades get obscured by the intake itself. That reduces radar signature, and then if it further turns away like this, and there's no closure rate difference between this aircraft and the ground below it, your radar is going to have a hard time finding it. So be aware of that. There's a few ways to defeat this. The best one is to do this and give yourself a wingman. Like so. And one thing you can do is, if you're kind of informally doing this, I'm just going to create some waypoints here just so you can visualize the flight plan. If you are flying in a zigzag pattern like this, when you're going this way, your radar is going to be scanning up here. When you turn left, your radar is going to be scanning out this way. And if you want to get your wingman to do this, see where I'm going with this? And you coordinate your turns, you're going to be scanning a bigger cone of space as you make your turns. So you're more likely to detect things that you wouldn't if you were flying in a straight line. And that way, one of you may actually be scanning down into a valley in which flankers are flying. So another thing, if you're flying perpendicular to the valleys here, you're going to have all the disadvantages I just described. But if you're flying parallel to it, like looking down into it like it's a trough, kind of like a Death Star trench run, flying above it, looking down, you're still going to have the issue with the Doppler or closure rate effect. But it's going to be easier for your aircraft to detect it. So instead of flying perpendicular to these valleys, if you're going to overfly a known area, let's say this one over here, see all these rivers, and let's say you have to go from A to B, or you're just on a fighter sweep and you're trying to find enemies, I wouldn't fly this way over these rivers. I would fly this way, this way, this way, this way, kind of, and lower your altitude down to 0 on the radar, so you can, kind of use it like a flashlight looking down into nooks and crannies. That is probably the best way to reduce the chances that you're going to get ambushed. And let's put this into practice. I'm going to eliminate this wingman here. And remember too that sometimes it's just not going to work. I've said this a million times. There's no such thing as a certainty. There's only just probabilities, and all you can do is skew the odds in your favor, and against the enemy trying to skew the odds in their favor. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to first approach it like this, see if we can detect the target, and then kind of break out to the right and use it like a snowplow and kind of dig through. And did I say snowplow? That's a different radar mode that the F-16 has in BMS. I don't want to confuse. Yeah, let's just get on with it, huh? Okay, so here we are. First thing, we're going to turn on our radar and drop that altitude down to 0. Another thing I forgot to mention is that in any radar mode, whether it's RWS, TWS, the farther, notice the altitude of the cone that I'm scanning changes as I increase and reduce the radar range. The farther away your scan is looking, the wider the cone is going to be. So what I like to do if I'm searching is put it at 80 and extend that as much as I can. Now look, so you've got a pretty close 29 spike here, but there's nothing on radar, and I assume that's probably because these sneaky little bastards are down here in that valley somewhere, flying from our left to our right, taking full advantage of our Doppler, the masking the Doppler effect, terrain masking, and flying perpendicular to our flight path. What I'm going to try and do is come up at them from behind at a speed different from theirs and see if I can acquire them on the radar. Of course, the best laid plans tend to fall apart, upon contact with the enemy, so we'll have to improvise a little bit here. Okay, so I see a target visually over here. Let's turn to the right. Point our radar downward toward the ground. And see if we can pick something up. This is also why as the tactician, you're gonna have to make a decision here. Radars almost always work better when they're in a look up, shoot up configuration. If you've flown the MiG-21 in DCS, you know that it likes to look up and shoot up because there's no interference from ground clutter or anything like that. That increases the kind of effective detection range of your missile and your radar. Look down, shoot down is possible, which is what I'm going for here, but the problem with that then is that your acquisition and lock capability is going to be diminished, even though you have a ballistic advantage. Your missiles when fired from up high have a energy advantage, but you have to balance that with the detection penalty. Let's go to the map here and see what we got going on. I still can't see them. Like I said. No such thing as a certainty. Which way were they going? They're going to take the right-hand turn. I'm actually going to slow down. Another thing you can do, which I forgot to mention. remember we bound a control. PRF, pulse repeat frequency select, right here. Okay, that's one thing I forgot to mention. I'm actually going to go into active pause and talk about this. If you look here, see where it said 1 high, 2 high, 3 high, 4 high on the bottom left? That is the pulse repetition frequency. That is how close together your radar pulses. It is a pulse Doppler radar, and that's the pulse part of it. How close together they are. In high mode like this, it's better at picking up things at a higher or equal altitude. Now, if you switch it to medium, that's going to be a little bit better, although not perfect, at picking up things that are lower, slower, and closer to the ground. You also have interleaved mode, which will kind of cycle back between the two. See how it's going high, medium, and that switches on and off per each sweep of the radar. Since I know my target is low, I'm going to keep it in medium, and we're going to resume our search. Also helps if I unpause track IR so I can see things with my head skull. Hey, look at that. We've acquired some targets. Check that out. So, if you suspect sneaky Russians flying below you in the ground clutter, a couple things: fly perpendicular to the valley you think they might be flying in, which you should assume is all of them, and go ahead and switch your radar down here to medium PRF. It'll help you pick things up. And just to kind of show them what we think of their sneaky behavior, let's do something to them. Remember too that, oh, we got a splash, that your radar guided missiles have little radar sets in their noses too, and those radars are subject to all the kind of same kinds of capabilities and limitations that your aircraft radar does. So I think that about covers it. I hope that helps you. If not, of course, let me know in the comments. And as always, good hunting, and feedback is appreciated. One thing I ask is that if you do give me a thumb down, I expect this, it's YouTube. Just let me know why. That would be, that would be useful. Like, hey idiot. Like, hey idiot, you left your speed brake open the whole time. That would be useful. Maybe I'm less likely to do that in the future. Anyway, thanks for watching, and good hunting out there.